The ocean had learned to keep secrets. At dawn, it lay still as glass, a mirror stretched from horizon to horizon. Clouds drifted like pale sails, untroubled by wind. From orbit, Earth looked peaceful, docile even. The Concorde satellites would see nothing but endless blue. No heat signatures. No magnetic disturbances. No wars. Just an obedient world finally cured of itself. But beneath that calm surface, 7 kilometers below, something stirred. Admiral Noah Clarke stood inside the panoramic observation bay of Base Thalassa. Deep in the Pacific Trench, hands clasped behind his back, the glass before him curved outward into darkness, reinforced with diamond mesh and prayer. Beyond it lay the abyss, black, cold, and full of dreams humanity was never meant to build again. Tiny bioluminescent creatures flickered through the water like falling stars. They swirled across the viewport as if drawn to him, as if curious about the quiet man who carried 1,000 forbidden hopes in his heart. "Admiral," came a voice from behind. "Telemetry stable. Construction hub reports completion on Hull 9. Clarke turned. Commander Amani Reyes stood at attention, tablet in hand, her reflection fractured by the glass. Her uniform bore no flag, no crest, just a patch of ocean blue with no meaning at all. That was how they survived. No emblems, no records, no proof. "Good," Clarke said quietly. "Seal the site. Run the mimic field." "Yes, sir." Reyes hesitated. "Satellite pass in 37 minutes. If they scan thermal layers, we'll need to flood the compartment." Clarke nodded once. "Do it." Her jaw tightened, but she obeyed. Every ship they've built required blood or breath, sometimes literally. The flooding would erase the heat signature, but risk drowning half the crew. They'd done it before. They'd do it again. Survival had no clean arithmetic. When she left, Clarke turned back to the window. The pressure outside would crush a battleship, but it comforted him. It reminded him of God's restraint, how, even in crushing silence, there could be purpose. He thought of the words carved above the command. "Deus in the shipyard. We obey the law of peace, till peace forgets the law of mercy." He'd written it himself, 50 years ago. The Galactic Concord Treaty had ended humanity's first and only interstellar war. The price of peace had been absolute disarmament. Earth was allowed only civilian craft, transport vessels, and scientific outposts. Every orbital dockyard was dismantled under alien supervision. The fleets that once defended 100 colonies were melted down into peace monuments. But humanity remembered. When the Concorde banned their weapons, they learned to build silence instead. When they banned the sky, humanity turned to the sea. The Ghost Fleet project had begun as a rumor among engineers' whispers, carried through the dark web, through refugee channels, through believers who refused to accept extinction disguised as peace. And somehow, through half a century of secrecy, they had built what no one believed possible. A navy that didn't exist. A low vibration trembled through the floor. Somewhere deep within the abyssal yards, a new hull shifted against its restraints. The sound resonated through the base like a heartbeat. Clarke closed his eyes. Hull 9. The Eidolon. Each ship had been named after something lost to Dolan. Revenant, grace, mercy. Words that had meant nothing to the Concorde, but everything to the people who built them. He opened his eyes again as the observation glass dimmed slightly, adjusting to a surge of light below. For a moment, the darkness parted. There it was, an enormous silhouette gliding slowly through the abyssal trench.
Old lights tracing its angular frame.
A vessel the length of a city, plated in composite alloys and pressure-reactive armor that shimmered like the scales of a living thing. The Eidolon, a warship that did not exist, and yet it breathed. "Never thought I'd live to see one finished," came a gruff voice beside him. Clarke hadn't heard Dr. Elias Rourke approach. The engineer always moved like a ghost fitting, given his title as the project's chief architect. His face was worn, its eyes too tired for a man who had once designed ships for the Terran Navy. "They told us to build weather monitors," Rourke muttered, gazing out at the ship. "I suppose in a sense, we are. We're watching for the worst weather in the universe. Clark allowed himself a thin smile. And we'll be ready when the storm comes. If they find us before then, it won't matter how ready we are. The Concorde's orbital scans are getting sharper. I can't keep bending the thermals forever. They won't find us, Clark said quietly. The engineer studied him. You say that like you know. Clark looked at the endless dark beyond the glass. Because we were meant to finish this. Because something has kept us hidden this long. Every time they've come close, something distracts them. A solar flare, a sensor fault, a data loop. Call it chance if you like. Rourke snorted softly. And you call it what? Clark's gaze softened. Grace. For a moment, the old engineer said nothing. Then he chuckled just once, a low sound of disbelief that wasn't quite mocking. If it's grace, Admiral, it's got a hell of a sense of humor. Maybe so, Clark said. But it's ours. Later, alone in his quarters, he watched the ocean sway beyond the small viewport. A silver fish drifted past, luminous, trailing a spiral of light. It lingered for a moment, staring at its own reflection in the glass, then vanished into the dark. He envied it. The room was simple, no luxury, no decoration. On the desk sat an old metal cross, its edges worn smooth. It had belonged to his father, a Navy chaplain during the old wars. Clark picked it up, feeling the weight of it in his palm. You'd call this treason? He whispered into the stillness. But if peace demands we forget who we are, what's left to protect? No answer came, only the low hum of the ocean's eternal machinery. He set the cross down carefully. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. The COM panel flickered to life, showing Commander Reyes's face. Admiral Concorde's surveillance patterns have shifted. They've deployed a new orbital relay over the equator. Purpose? Unclear. It's transmitting low-frequency pulses, possibly seismic mapping. Clark frowned. They're looking for hidden reactors. That's what we think. How long before they cover the Pacific grid? 3 months, maybe less. He exhaled slowly. Then we finish in 2. Sir Reyes said, hesitating, we're already at critical strain. Hull 10's under fabrication. If we rush it, we risk structural failure. I know, he said softly. But the Concorde won't wait. They never do. Hours later, the construction bays roared to life. Through miles of pressure and water, mechanical arms moved like gods in the deep. Girders welded themselves. Nanofabricators spun fiber and carbon. Drones weaved armor plates along invisible hulls. It was creation and defiance blended into one sacred act. Clark stood in the control chamber, watching through holographic feeds as a ship's skeleton came together. Engineers moved like ants across scaffolds. Voices echoed through COM channels, tired and reverent. Pressure. Steady. Thermal masking active. Power relay. Online, begin plating sequence on the keel. It felt like watching humanity remember itself. He thought of the words of an old psalm his father used to quote. He maketh the deep to boil like a pot. He maketh a path to shine after him. He didn't know if God still cared for mankind, but perhaps the deep still remembered. His voice dot midnight. The sirens sounded. Every corridor turned red. Alarms pulsed through the base like a heartbeat gone wrong. Clark ran to Ward Command, his boots echoing on steel. Report. Reyes met him halfway, eyes wide. Orbital sensor ping direct pass over our quadrant. They're using polarized sonar. We think they caught a reflection off the Eidolon's dorsal plate. Confirm breach? Negative. But it's close. How close? 2 degrees in spectrum variance. If they compare baselines, we're exposed. Clark's mind moved faster than fear. Flood all thermal conduits. Vent reactor waste through trench filters. Release drones alpha through delta scatter signatures. Yes, sir. She turned to run, but he caught her arm. Reyes, activate prayer mode. Her eyes flickered with confusion, then understanding. Sir, just do it. She nodded once, jaw tight. Prayer mode. The lights dimmed. The base's hum softened, replaced by the low thrumming of pressure pumps and distant ocean currents. In the dark, Clark felt the abyss closing in cold, immense, and silent. Minutes passed. The warning lights faded to amber, then green. Signal lost, Reyes reported over comms. They're gone. Clark exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Around him, the crew began to murmur relief, disbelief, quiet laughter. But beneath it all, something else pulsed through them. Not just relief. Something deeper. Faith. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was coincidence. But in that moment, every soul in Base Thalassa felt the same impossible certainty. They were meant to survive. Hours later, Clark stood alone in the observation bay once more. The ocean beyond was calm again, as if nothing had happened. Tiny lights drifted in the dark. He touched the glass. "We're not supposed to fight again," he murmured. "But we will. Because peace built on chains isn't peace at sleep, somewhere in the abyss." The Eidolon's engines pulsed once slow, like a heartbeat. And Clark knew. When the storm came, humanity would rise from the deep. And the universe would remember why it feared the sound of human defiance. The ocean was their cathedral now. Every rivet, every hull plate, every whisper of machinery was a hymn. 3 kilometers below the Pacific surface, humanity's greatest heresy breathed in darkness. Base Thalassa stretched for miles through the trenchy labyrinth of shipyards, pressure chambers and living quarters carved into volcanic rock. Drones floated like glowing jellyfish through the flooded corridors, carrying or fusion cells. In the dreams of 1,000 silent laborers, no sunlight reached this place. Yet it pulsed with human light. Admiral Noah Clark walked the length of Dock 3, where Hull 10, the unfinished dreadnought, Seraphim rested inside its skeletal cradle. Massive cranes drifted along rails overhead, showering sparks in slow motion. The air was thick with ionized metal and the scent of burning. Carbon a strange nostalgia for a man who'd once sworn never to build another warship. "Admiral." Commander Reyes called from a scaffold above. Keel sections aligned. "We're beginning the armor plating sequence." Clark looked up. Reyes's face was lit by the welding glow. She wore no rank pins anymore. The only symbol she carried was the streak of soot across her cheek. Around her, engineers worked in silence, focused, reverent. "How long until she floats?" Clark asked. 3 weeks if the welds hold." "They will," Clark said, though his voice carried a shadow of prayer. He moved toward the observation platform at the edge of the dock. The Seraphim's spine stretched before him 300 meters of cold defiance. A ghost of all the fleets humanity once commanded. Her hull design had been repurposed from deep mining barges, her reactor from civilian freighters, her weapon arrays disguised as scientific equipment. Every centimeter was a lie told in the name of survival. Rourke appeared beside him. Hands stained with graphite, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. "She's too big," the engineer muttered. "If the Concorde scans deep enough, even the thermal masking won't hide her." Clark studied the hull. "Then we make her part of the trench. Weld her into the rock until she's indistinguishable." Oh. Rourke exhaled. "You can't keep hiding forever, Admiral." Clark looked at him calm. "I don't need forever. I just need time." Later, the 2 men rode a pressurized tram down into the fabrication core, the beating heart of the Ghost Fleet. Here, molten metal poured through conduits like lava rivers. Thousands of nanoforges worked in concert, controlled by a lattice AI called EVE, the only machine allowed to know the full scope of the project. Her voice echoed through the chamber soft, feminine, oddly serene. "Welcome back, Admiral Clark. Output efficiency is at 92%. Reactor heat remains stable." Clark looked up toward the holographic display that shimmered above the central forge. A faceless silhouette appeared in avatar of light. "Neither human nor alien. Report the resource deficit," he said. "Tritanium reserves are depleting faster than predicted. Hull 11 cannot begin without additional material extraction from the Mariana sector." "Too risky," Rourke cut in. "That trench's seismic vents are unpredictable. One wrong drill, and the Concorde picks up the disturbance. Then the fleet will remain incomplete," the AI said simply. Silence hung. Clark stepped closer to the hologram. "Eve," he said softly, "run a projection. If an orbital incursion occurred tomorrow, how many operational holes could we field?" 9 ships. 4 carriers, 3 destroyers, 2 dreadnoughts. Estimated survival rate against unknown aggressor? 11%. Rock cursed under his breath. 11. That's suicide. 11%, Clark repeated, his voice like stone. That's better than extinction. Would you like to adjust the risk parameters? The AI asked. No, he said. We build until the ocean says stop. The tram rattled onward. Through the window, it passed through chambers where children played among pipes and oxygen tanks, descendants of the first engineers who had chosen exile beneath the waves. The surface governments denied their existence, calling them myths. But they were the true heart of humanity, now families born under pressure. Raised on the hum of reactors and the rhythm of hidden machinery, Rourke watched them silently. We weren't supposed to drag civilians into this. Clark's eyes softened. They came on their own. Some people can't live in cages. He remembered the surface, the clean, sterile cities under alien surveillance. The laws that forbade military research, even forbidden speech. A single word defense could get a man executed. The Concord said peace had to be enforced. They'd built a prison and called it civilization. Down here, at least they were still human. Later, Clark found himself in the hydrostatic cupola, a small circular chamber carved from obsidian and coral. No priests, no scriptures, just a single viewport facing the abyss. Inside floated a cross made of titanium, tethered by thin wire, slowly turning in the current. It had been placed there by the first engineers half a century ago. No one claimed to believe, yet no one dared remove it. He sat alone in the dim light, hands folded loosely. For a long time, he said nothing. Then quietly, "If you're listening, I don't need miracles. Just clarity." Waited. The ocean answered in silence, pressing against the glass. Somewhere beyond that darkness, a whale song rose, a haunting, low-frequency echo that vibrated through his bones. He closed his eyes. "Good enough," he murmured. 3 days later, the storm came not of wind, but of data, Admiral. Reyes burst into command, her voice sharp. The Concord relay over the equator just completed its seismic scan. They've flagged anomalies, 3 of them, one directly above us. Clark moved to the holomap. Red pulses blinked across the Pacific grid. How long before they verify? Hours, maybe less. Rourke appeared, pale. We can flood the trench again, but it won't erase this one. They've got layered imaging now. Once they compare densities, they'll see we've hollowed out the seabed. Clark's pulse slowed. His mind moved through possibilities like a chessboard. Evacuate non-essential personnel to Sector 12. Seal fabrication lines. Prepare to jettison debris fields. Reyes hesitated. "Admiral, if they send a Concord probe, they'll find everything." Clark turned to her. "Then we don't let it reach us." An hour later, the command bay dimmed to red as the first probe entered the atmosphere. It was small, sleek, and alive, grown from Concord biotech, half organic, half machine. It dove into the Pacific like a silver arrow in the dark control chamber. The crew watched its descent on a flickering monitor. Depth, 4,000 meters and falling, Reyes reported. Trajectory toward trench apex. Intercept range. Clark asked. For minutes. He looked to Rourke. EMP drone? Loaded, but range is limited. If we fire, it'll spike the magnetic field. They'll notice. Clark stared at the glowing dot. It was already too close. Sometimes he thought defiance demands to be seen. Launch it, he said. The drone fired from a hidden silo, a flash of light swallowed by the sea. Moments later, a shockwave rippled through the trench. The screens went white, then black. When they returned, the probe's signal was gone. Contact lost, Reyes whispered. Probe destroyed. The room was silent. Then a quiet voice from one of the technicians. They'll know, sir. They'll have to know. Clark nodded slowly. Yes, but now we know too. Know what? Rourke asked. That they're watching more closely than ever. And that we can't hide forever. Hours passed in tense stillness. No retaliation came. No Concord patrols. Just silence. The crew dispersed in exhausted relief. But Clark stayed in command, watching the empty blue hologram of Earth's oceans rotate before him. Somewhere above that sphere, alien eyes waited. He thought of the Trediate's clauses, its promises, its lies. They'd called it the Galactic Concord for eternal peace. But peace, he thought, was never eternal. It was only the space between storms. Reyes re-entered quietly. "Admiral," she said, "we've recovered fragments from the probe. Rourke thinks it was broadcasting, even during descent." "To who?" "The relay. They know we exist now." Clark's hand tightened on the console. "Then we have no time left." He turned toward her, eyes steady. "Order Eve to accelerate completion on all active hulls. Divert every resource we have. Oxygen, power, metal, everything." Reyes swallowed. "That'll kill a third of the base's systems. Life support won't hold." "I know, sir. People will die." Clark's voice was soft, but unyielding. "People will die anyway if we're found unarmed. This way at least they'll die building something that matters." She looked at him for a long moment, then saluted, silently. The next days blurred into one unbroken act of creation. The shipyards burned with light. Machines groaned, welders screamed. Children carried tools through smoke-filled tunnels. Every corridor shook with the rhythm of hammers and the hum of reactors. Clark barely slept. He moved from dock to dock, from reactor bay to command post, his voice hoarse but steady. Reyes oversaw logistics. Rourke worked until his hands bled. Even Eve's voice began to waver, her circuits overheating from constant calculation. Still, the fleet took shape. 9 warships now rested beneath the waves' monuments of defiance, wrapped in silence. On the 7th night, as the last hull sealed, Clark stood in the observation bay again. The Eidolon, Grace, Mercy, and Seraphim floated in darkness, their lights dim but alive. They looked like sleeping leviathans waiting for God's command to rise. Reyes joined him quietly. "If they come, do you think we can win?" Clark watched the ships for a long moment. "No," he said honestly, "but we can remind them who we are." A tremor shook the base deep, distant and wrong. The lights flickered. An alarm wailed. "Admiral." Reyes snapped into her come. "Report." Evie's voice returned, distorted but clear, unidentified gravitational signature entering solar orbit. Mass comparable to Concord Capital Fleet. The room fell silent. Clark looked toward the abyss. "They found us," Rourke whispered. Clark's eyes hardened, not with fear, but with something older, fiercer. Then it begins. Asterisk, asterisk, above the clouds. The stars looked back. The Galactic Concord did not sleep. Orbiting in the cold black between Mars and Earth hung the Sentinel array, a ring of observation stations, each operated by a different alien species, but united by one purpose: to ensure that mankind never built a weapon again. They called it peacekeeping. Humanity called it chains. The command center of Sentinel-9 glowed in sterile white light. The walls pulsed faintly, grown from living crystal fusion of biology and technology, perfected by the Concord's elder races. Every surface seemed to breathe. Commander Valerix, of the Vorn Dominion, studied the holographic projection rotating before him, a three-dimensional map of Earth's oceans. Red pulses flickered along the Pacific Trench, data returned from a lost probe. The readings were impossible. Metallic density inconsistent with geological formation, thermal irregularities matching reactor output, and then total signal collapse. Vale's 4 eyes narrowed, replayed the descent. The projection shimmered, showing the probe's last moments a silent fall through dark water, its sensors registering metallic reflections and faint heat plumes before being swallowed by a sudden pulse of electromagnetic interference. A human voice whispered through static. Barely audible, prayer mode engaged, then nothing. Vale straightened. "Prayer mode," he murmured in the Concord tongue. "What is prayer?" Elsewhere within the array, the Council of Watchers convened. 9 species represented the Concord. Their bodies were diversum crystalline, some liquid, some merely light given shape, but their authority was unified. The chamber pulsed with soundless conversation, neural waves overlapping in colors invisible to the human eye. Vale stood at the edge of the circle, an outsider even among his peers. He had served during the human war. He remembered the screams of burned cities and the stubborn, furious light in human eyes that no logic could extinguish. They should not be capable of this. Hissed one Benya, serpentine form of molten glass, known as Therak. The treaty ensured the dismantling of all offensive technology. Vale bowed slightly. With respect, the treaty ensured visibility. But the humans, they build in shadow.
Speculation.
The crystalline being Kos replied, voice ringing like broken glass. You have no proof. Ow. The probe's data is proof enough, Vale countered. Metallic structures. Energy emissions. Artificial harmonics. They are constructing something beneath their oceans. Impossible, Kos said. The pressure would crush, Vale interrupted, softly. They have always found ways to breathe where others suffocate. The chamber stilled. No one liked to admit it. But every race in the Concord feared that same human quality, adaptation born of desperation, Commander Erix. The council chair finally said, its form shifting like a veil of mist, you are authorized to investigate further. Deploy a stealth vessel to the Terran system. Observe. If you confirm violation, we will respond. Decisively, Vale inclined his head. And if they resist? The chair's form darkened. Then peace must remember its price. Meanwhile, far below, in the quiet heart of Base Thalassa, Admiral Noah Clark stared at the same stars that watched him. He didn't need sensors to know they were coming. Sometimes the ocean itself carried the warning, the subtle shift in current, the uneasy hum in reactor conduits. The instinct that crawled up the human spine before disaster struck, Admiral Shearer said, stepping into the observation chamber. Eve confirms gravitational anomalies at the edge of the solar orbit. Could be a fleet. Not could be, Clark said softly. It is. Rourke's voice came through the come from engineering. We're not ready for open conflict. Even if the fleet's operational, our reactor reserves are minimal. The Seraphim's core isn't calibrated. It won't attack, Clark said. Not yet, Reyes frowned. Then what's the plan? He turned toward the glass, where faint shafts of light drifted from the surface far above. We wait. Wait for what? For them to decide whether we're worth saving? 2 days passed. Above Earth, the first Concord stealth cruiser entered orbit Cia's Virally. Its hull shimmered with adaptive camouflage, invisible to ground-based sensors. From its observation deck, Vale watched the blue planet turn beneath him. He could see the faint scars left from the war cratered. Continents now hidden beneath forests, the skeletal remains of orbital rings floating in silence. Yet below all that ruin, the planet pulsed with life again. Too much life, perhaps. Prepare deep scan arrays, he ordered. The technicians obeyed. Beams of quantum resonance reached through the clouds, slicing into the sea. For a moment, all was quiet. Then the readings surged. Vale leaned forward. Metallic density off the charts. Geometric structures. Heat fluctuations. And something else. Low-frequency vibrations forming patterns too deliberate to be natural. Not machinery, not geology, music. He amplified it. A faint human voice echoed through static, ancient and raw. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, Vale froze. That prayer again. Back in the trench, alarms flared. Concord scan detected. Reyes shouted. Quantum frequency direct overhead. Clark's pulse steadied. Ships, silent mode, shield cores. Eve, initiate noise field. Affirmative, the AI intoned. Generating resonance interference. Across the Ghost Fleet low. Vibrations rippled through the ocean frequencies designed to mimic tectonic activity. The trench roared like an awakening beast. Above them, the Concord sensors blurred. Data scrambled. The map dissolved into meaningless static. On board the Virali Vale hissed as his instruments went dark. Interference. organic resonance masking. They're hiding. The technician looked back, uneasy. Commander, should we deploy atmospheric drones? Vale hesitated.
How?
If the humans truly had rebuilt weapons, even drones might provoke them. Yet something inside him, a flicker of memory, perhaps whispered caution. He had seen humanity's fury once before. He did not wish to see it again. Maintain orbit, he said finally. Let's see what they do. In the silence that followed, Base Thalassa held its breath. Hours passed. The deep groaned. The lights dimmed to conserve power. Inside command, Clark stood unmoving before the holomap. His crew worked quietly around him, faces pale but steady. Faith and fear shared the same pulse here. Rourke entered, exhausted. They're holding position above the equator, not scanning anymore. Maybe they lost interest. They don't lose interest, Clark said. They're waiting. For what? For justification. Reyes frowned. You mean a reason to strike? He nodded. They won't risk attacking a compliant world. They need evidence. If they find proof, they'll call it a restoration of peace. And if they don't... Clark's voice was almost a whisper. Then they'll make some night cycle. Clark walked alone through the shipyard, past sleeping hulls that loomed like mountains. The water outside glowed faintly, stirred by unseen currents. He stopped before the Seraphim's hull and pressed his palm against the cold metal. The ship felt alive beneath his touch, a deep, rhythmic pulse from its reactor core. You'll have to wake soon, he murmured. Sooner than I hoped. He thought of all the lives hidden down here, all the children who'd never seen the sun, all the prayers whispered in the dark. If the Concord came, there would be no surrender. Not this time. He closed his eyes and whispered a quiet line, half to himself, half to the void. If we burn, let it be to light the way. Far above, Vale watched the data feeds one last time. The readings remained scrambled, yet something about the pattern gnawed at him. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. He zoomed in on a thermal echo along the trench wall. For a heartbeat, a faint shape appeared, an outline too symmetrical to be natural. A ship. He froze the image, enhancing contrast. The hull was smooth, angular, unmistakably artificial. A human warship, ancient design, yes, but massive. His heart sank. They did it, he whispered. They actually did it. The technician turned. Commander Vale's jaw tightened. He remembered Earth burning, human fleets rising like storms, the cries of his soldiers dying to the sound of human defiance. He remembered thinking they were monsters, but as he stared at the image now, he didn't see monsters. He saw desperation. He turned off the projection. Erase the scan logs, he said quietly. Sir, you heard me. Erase everything. No trace. The technician hesitated. That's treason. Vale's eyes, four of them, burning with old regret, met his. No, it's mercy. On Earth, Clark stood once more in the observation bay. The ocean was calm again. Above, the stars shimmered faintly through the surface. Reyes entered quietly. No orbital movement for 12 hours. They're leaving. He didn't respond at first. His gaze lingered on the distant light filtering down through miles of water, like a blessing descending from the heavens. Then someone up there still remembers mercy, he said softly. Reyes frowned. You think? He shook his head. Doesn't matter. We keep building. God buys us time, we use it. She nodded. Outside the abyss rumbled low, deep, ancient. The ships glowed faintly in answer, as though the sea itself whispered back, and somewhere far above, a single alien. Commander sat alone in orbit, staring down at the quiet world below, wondering why after all these centuries humans still prayed before they fought. Asterisk, asterisk, beneath 10,000 meters of dark pressure. The human heart still found ways to hope and to break. For nearly 3 years after the Virali's silent retreat, the ocean held its secret. No alien fleets returned. No warning transmissions came from the Concord. The world above continued its slow, careful resurrection, green returning to continents once burned black. Colonies rebuilt under the watch of alien advisors who never guessed what slept below. Humanity played its role well, Factories produced nothing suspicious. Satellites reported nothing unusual. Treaty of peace and purity, signed in ash and blood, remained unbroken in appearance. It was a lie made of steel. It's prayer and silence. Admiral Noah Clarke stood on the command deck of Base Thalassa, watching the Pacific shift on the holographic map. A faint glow marked the trench where the Ghost Fleet slept, more than 50 vessels now, some half-finished, some older than memory. Behind him, Commander Reyes approached quietly. "Construction on Seraphim is complete," she said. "Rourke wants to begin core ignition tests." Clarke didn't turn. "And our reactor containment?" "Stable. Barely. He says if we push past 30%, we risk detection from orbit. Then we stop at 29. Reyes hesitated. "We've been in the dark too long, sir. The world's changing up there. People are asking questions. If one of the Concorde's inspectors decides to dig deeper," Clarke faced her at last. His eyes were calm but heavy, "and they'll find exactly what we want them to find. Topside, the facade above the ocean." Port Dawn gleamed like humanity's redemption, a floating megacity run jointly by Earth and Concorde overseers. Its spires rose from the water like glass fingers, its markets filled with trade between alien and human merchants. Tourists called it the symbol of peace. They never saw the sealed elevators beneath Dock 47, the ones that descended into the black. Down there, beneath layers of bureaucratic camouflage and false infrastructure maps, lived the truth in a dim workshop, lined with reactor coils. Chief Engineer Rourke wiped oil from his hands and grinned like a man who'd made peace with madness. "Look at her," he said, gesturing to the Seraphim's open engine core. "Born from forbidden science, powered by a reactor no one's supposed to know exists, cooled by ocean blood and shielded by God's own salt water. She's beautiful." Reyes crossed her arms. "She's a death sentence if the Concorde ever finds her." He laughed. "Then we'll die in style." Clarke entered quietly, scanning the readings. "Status? Cold core synchronized? Nanite stabilizers aligned?" But Rourke hesitated. There's something odd in the readings. An external signal bleed. Weak, but constant. Source: unknown. Could be geological. Could be, well, not geological. Show me. Asterisk. Rourke tapped the console. A faint waveform appeared, steady, rhythmic, almost melodic. Not random noise. Reyes leaned closer. "It's repeating." Rourke nodded grimly. "And it's coming from above." The return of the Watchers in orbit, the Varelli drifted once more above Earth. Commander Vale Erix had not slept in 60 cycles. He had lied to his superiors, claimed the humans were clean, compliant, disarmed. His false report had bought humanity time. But lies, he knew, aged poorly in the light. Now the Council demanded a reinspection. A new ship, CS Harbinger, had arrived. Its commander Therak. The molten serpent who had once fought beside Vale in the war. Therak did not believe in mercy. "Your last report was..." "Incomplete," Therak hissed, as they stood before the viewing glass. "You said there was no anomaly." "There wasn't," Vale replied. "Merely interference." Therak's eyes blazed. "Interference that sings, Commander. Our long-range arrays captured resonance-structured frequency patterns beneath the Pacific. It is a message, a prayer." Vale's blood ran cold. He'd erased the data, buried every trace, but the ocean itself had remembered the sound. Therak's voice was quiet now. "We are deploying recon probes. If there is anything there, we will find it. And then we will finish what your hesitation left undone." The discovery back in Thalassa, alarms whispered through the deep. "Quantum pings detected," Eve announced. "Pattern matches Concorde surveillance protocol." Reyes cursed softly. "They're scanning again." "Position," Clarke demanded, descending from orbit along equatorial arc. "Multiple vectors." "Deploy the shield veil," Clarke ordered. "All reactors to low output. No emissions." The fleet dimmed. The trench fell into near darkness. Rourke muttered under his breath, back to hiding like rats. But this time, the Concorde probes didn't just scan, they burrowed. They entered the trench like mechanical parasites, shedding light through the black water. One drifted close to a half-finished halt, The vigilant hand, its sensors flickered in confusion. It began transmitting. "Commander," Reyes said, panic creeping into her voice. "We're exposed." Clark's mind raced. Destroy the probe and risk revealing weapons. Fire or do nothing and guarantee discovery. He chose neither. "Eve." "Engage mirror sequence," confirmed, the AI replied. A low hum spread through the deep. All across the trench, ship holes began to shimmer, molecular camouflage fields bending light, simulating the visual profile of stone. Within seconds, the warships vanished into the illusion of the ocean floor. The probe scanned again and saw nothing. It drifted upward, confused. Before a sudden magnetic surge, one that Clark hadn't ordered, fried its circuits. Rourke stared at his console. "That wasn't me." "Then who?" Reyes began. Before she could finish, Eve spoke again. "Incoming message. Encrypted. Origin, off-world relay." Clark frowned. "Decrypt." The hologram flickered and resolved into the alien face of Vale Irix. "The message, Admiral Clark," Vale said, his voice calm but heavy with warning. "There is no time. Another ship harbinger has orders to confirm your existence and burn the ocean if necessary." Reyes stepped forward, stunned. "You're helping us?" Vale's image flickered, static bleeding into the transmission. "Once, I believed humans were chaos incarnate. Now I know chaos was your gift. The universe stagnates without it, but you cannot win open war, not yet. You must move." Clark's jaw tightened. "Move where?" "There's a storm forming near the Mariana Rift. Use it. It will mask your energy signature for 30 hours. After that, nothing can hide you." The feed glitched. "I cannot protect you again. Forgive me." Then it vanished. Silence filled the room. Rourke exhaled. "Well, that's new." Clark turned toward the central display. "All hands. Prepare emergency relocation." "We're going dark," Reyes frowned. "You're actually trusting him?" Clark didn't answer for a long moment. "Then he's the reason we're alive." "That's enough." The exodus of ghosts, the sea erupted with light as the ghost fleet awakened. Massive silhouettes stirred in the abyss, reactor cores flaring one by one like deep-sea suns. The Seraphim led the exodus, her engines igniting with a low, resonant hum that shook the ocean floor. "Navigation plot course through the rift," Clark commanded. "Course plotted," Eve replied. "Estimated traversal time, 27 hours. Then let's pray the storm lasts 28. Outside, thunder rolled even beneath the sea. Currents twisted. Pressure waves boomed like distant drums of war. The fleet moved, slow and colossal, through the shadowed trench ghosts, leaving their grave. High above, the Harbinger watched. Their ox voice was a hiss of triumph. Energy signatures confirmed. Artificial mass movement detected. Prepare orbital strike. Vale turned sharply. "Wait, that could be natural displacement." "Seismic activity there, Ak. Cut him off." "Enough excuses. You protected them once? You will not again." He raised a limb of molten glass and gave the order. In the abyss, alarm screamed. "Orbital charge detected." Reyes shouted. "They're targeting coordinates directly above us." "Eve," Clark barked. "Activate Seraphim shield." "Warning. Full activation will reveal us." He gritted his teeth. "Do it." The Seraphim's reactor roared to life. Energy cascaded through her hull, forming a translucent dome of golden plasma that spread over the fleet like a second ocean. The beam struck. Light filled the world white. Blinding, divine. Then it was gone when the smoke cleared. The fleet still stood. Rourke stared in disbelief. "We held." Clark didn't smile. "No, we survived round one." In orbit, the Harbinger's bridge was chaos. The blast had failed. The trench was still intact. Therak roared. "Impossible." Vale watched the readings, awe and horror mixing in his gaze. "No, not impossible. Human." Asterisk, the storm swallowed the ocean whole. Lightning danced across the surface like the wrath of forgotten gods. And the waves towered high enough to swallow mountains. But beneath, The deep held its breath. The Ghost Fleet 52 vessels of forbidden steel. And faith moved silently through the Mariana Rift. Each ship was a cathedral of defiance, born from rust, scrap, and prayer. Every bolt and weld was an act of rebellion against the treaty that had sworn to tame mankind forever. On the bridge of the Seraphim, Admiral Noah Clarke watched the abyssal lights flicker on his display. The storm above shielded them from Concorde satellites, just as the alien veil had promised. But time was running thin. "Signal bleed is increasing," reported Commander Reyes, her voice taut. "We can't stay under much longer." "The rift's collapsing behind us," Lieutenant Clarke said softly. "We don't need to go back," Rourke grunted from his console. "Never thought I'd hear that from a Navy man." "I'm not a Navy man anymore," Clarke murmured. "Just a sinner building ghosts." The Harbinger descends above the storm. The Harbinger loomed like an angel carved from fire and glass. Commander Therax stood over the viewing pit, his molten skin reflecting the pulse of orbital cannons charging again. Around him, the Concorde bridge glowed with symbols and murmuring drones. Targeting sequence locked, a drone intoned. Atmospheric interference, minimal. Recommend immediate purge. But Vale Erix, standing beside Therax, dared to speak. "They have not attacked. You strike civilians now." "Entire oceans," Therax's voice thundered. "They built weapons, Vale. The treaty forbids even the dream of them." Vale's eyes dimmed. "Perhaps dreams are all they have left." Therax turned, fury rippling across his molten features. "Then let them dream of ashes." The Harbinger's cannons pivoted 3 titanic rings of plasma aligning on the Pacific storm, the rising in, the trench. The alarms began again. Orbital energy surge detected. Evie's voice echoed through the hull. "Strike inbound," Rourke cursed. "They're not scanning this time, they're burning." Reyes turned to Clarke. "Orders." Clarke's eyes locked on the forward display. The surface trembled under the pressure of the storm, light piercing through cracks in the clouds. "We rise," he said. The word hit the crew like a revelation. Rourke blinked. "You mean surface?" "Admiral, the treaty's dead," Clarke snapped. "It died the moment they fired on an ocean." Silence. Then Rourke grinned like a man facing the gallows. "About damn time." Seraphim began to ascend. Water sheared away from her hull as thrusters ignited, trails of bioluminescent plankton spiraling in her wake like spirits rising to heaven. All across the trench, the Ghost Fleet followed colossal shadows climbing toward the light. Pressure alarms screamed. Decks shuddered and metal groaned like whale song. But the fleet kept moving, tearing through miles of black water until the first glimmer of sunlight broke through, and then, the ocean exploded. 50 warships breached the surface at once, scattering waves the size of skyscrapers. The storm's lightning struck their hulls, painting them gold and white dot to the satellites above. It was as if the sea itself had come alive to the people watching from the shores of Tokyo, Manila, and San Francisco. It was a miracle to the Concorde. It was blasphemy. The Skyburns targets acquired, a drone announced aboard the Harbinger. Multiple mass displacements. Confirmed, metallic-armed human. Therax's mouth twisted in satisfaction. At last, the vermin showed their teeth. Vale's hands trembled at his sides. "Therax, stop this. You're about to start the war we ended 2 centuries ago." Therax's molten face leaned close. "The war never ended. They simply hid." And with that, he gave the order. Above Earth, the Harbinger's cannons lit the heavens. Columns of white plasma lanced downward through the clouds, scorching the storm apart. Lightning bent sideways under the sheer energy, and the Pacific boiled. But the Ghost Fleet did not scatter. They fought back. Opened fire. On the Seraphim's bridge. Clarke watched the descending beams and felt something ancient awaken inside him. "Eve," he said quietly. "Unlock primary batteries. Warning. Activation of orbital weapons is prohibited under... Unlock them. Confirmed." The deck rumbled. Massive launch bays opened along the Seraphim's spine. Ion cannons rotated upward, their barrels glowing like molten veins. Fleet command, Clark said into the com, voice steady. Target orbital coordinates, Delta 1. Fire on my mark. Admiral Reyes whispered. If we do this, there's no going back. He looked at her, this woman who had followed him into hell, in silence, and gave a faint, tired smile. There was never a back. He raised his hand. Mark. The sea roared with fire. Hundreds of plasma lances tore skyward, ripping through storm clouds in a symphony of defiance. The night became day as the first human fleet in 3 centuries opened. Fire on the heavens. The Harbinger shook as the first salvo hit its shields. The rack roared in disbelief. Impossible. They shouldn't have this range. Vale whispered under his breath. They shouldn't have survived the war either. Faith in the fire inside the Seraphim, the power grid screamed. One reactor overloaded, then another. Engineers worked with bleeding hands to stabilize the flux. Rourke slammed a breaker shut, sparks cutting across his arm. We're burning ourselves alive just to stay in this fight. Clark's voice came over the com. Then burn with purpose. Reyes turned toward him. We can't win, sir. Not like this. Hugh met her eyes. Then we don't win. We prove we were worth fighting. In orbit, the Harbinger retaliated. Its counterfire split the sea. One of the smaller destroyers, Vigilant, was obliterated instantly. The shock wave knocked 2 others into the depths. The coms filled with static and screams. Clark gripped the railing until his knuckles went white. Eve, deploy defensive screen. Shield levels critical. Reactor integrity at 32%. Do it anyway. A shimmering field expanded over the fleet. Beams struck it and fractured into auroras of light, cascading across the storm like divine fire. Then came the voice. This is Captain Juno of the horizon we're hit. Losing altitude. Hold formation. Clark barked. Negative. Reactor breach. Tell my family the line went dead. For a heartbeat, Clark couldn't speak. Then quietly. She had no family. Reyes swallowed hard. She meant us. Heaven breaks. The second salvo from the Seraphim tore open the Harbinger's outer shield. One of its plasma rings shattered, spraying molten fragments into orbit. Vale stumbled as the ship lurched. Terse screamed. You see? This is why we forbade them. They will burn the stars to light their pride. Vale straightened, voice trembling. Or maybe they burned to be seen. Therak lunged for the controls. A Vale struck first, driving a pulse blade into the molten commander's chest. The bridge filled with searing light. When it faded, Vale stood alone. He opened a channel frequency tight. Encrypted beyond protocol. Admiral Clark, he said, voice raw. This is Vale Erix. You've done enough. Retreat before they send the fleet. You cannot hold the sky. On the Seraphim's bridge, Clark listened in silence. Why? He asked softly. Why help us? Because Vale said, you reminded me what life feels like when it's afraid and alive. The channel cut. The aftermaths minutes later, the Harbinger broke, orbit dying fire trailing behind it. The storm collapsed into stillness, and the ghost fleet floated. Amid a graveyard of smoke and shattered clouds, half their ships were gone. The survivors were scarred, limping, bleeding light into the waves. But they still floated. They still breathed. Reyes approached Clark, her face pale. Orders, sir. He stared out the viewport, where dawn was breaking over the Pacific's oft. Golden, impossibly gentle. Stand down, he whispered. Let them know we're still here. Cross Earth, people watched the broadcast the moment the ocean rose and the heavens burned. For the first time in 3 centuries, humanity had fought not out of conquest, but conviction, and somewhere in the wreckage, amid the silence of smoke and rain, a voice seemed to whisper not from radio or machine, but from the fabric of the storm itself. Not luck, it said. Someone wanted you to live. Asterisk, the storm had passed, leaving the Pacific a glassy, trembling mirror. Humanity's fleet floated like leviathans in the calm, scars of battle glinting across their hulls. Above, dawn stretched across the world, burning gold into clouds and waves alike. On the Seraphim's bridge, Admiral Noah Clarke watched the horizon. His fleet was battered, but alive. Only the first ripple of the ocean betrayed their presence other. Humans still believed the deep to be empty, and that was the advantage. The fleet emerges, status report. Clarke demanded. Commander Reyes leaned over the console. 9 operational vessels, Admiral. 28% hull integrity across the fleet. Power cores stable, but strained. Secondary batteries at 34%. Clarke nodded slowly. And the cities above? Any casualties reported from the orbital bombardment? Reyes shook her head. Minimal. Mostly Concorde strikes on remote installations. Civilians unaware we disguised it as storm damage. He exhaled. The surface was still fragile, still untested. They couldn't afford to lose the ocean cities, let alone risk Concorde retaliation against unarmed populations. Eve, he said, voice steady, open all comm channels. Issue Surface Protocol Alpha. Affirmative, the AI intoned. Surface Protocol Alpha initiated. Warnings broadcast to all human coastal installations. Prepare evacuation and mobilization procedures. Estimated compliance, 83%. Good, Clarke murmured. We make the ocean our fortress, the surface our shield. The human networker crossed scattered islands and hidden harbors. Humanity began to move. Coastal research stations hummed with activities, small submarines. Fuel depots, sensor arrays, once civilian, now military, in purpose. Activated by encrypted directives from the Ghost Fleet, Clarke moved among them via submersible relay. The command module was cramped, the hum of the engine pressing against his skull. But he felt alive in ways the open ocean had never offered. Rourke leaned over the console, wiping sweat from his brow. I've retrofitted the civilian freighters into stealth transports. With thermal dampening, they can ferry refugees and personnel between surface stations without detection, Reyes added. Medical units, engineers, and civilian technicians are ready. Most think they're participating in disaster relief drills. They'll never know the truth until they see the fleet. Clarke studied the map. Then they are ready for war before they even realize it. The Concorde watches far above. Vale Erix monitored Earth from orbit. The orbital calm had returned, but Vale could sense the shift humans were reorganizing, adapting, preparing. Something deeper than technology, instinct, courage, defiance. The Harbinger was no longer in orbit. Its hull had been shattered, a casualty of the Ghost Fleet's fire. Thermac was gone, either dead or burned beyond recognition. But Vale knew it didn't matter. The Concorde would respond. They always did. He whispered into his cum. They are not defeated. The humans are building something else, something we cannot yet see. Training the shadows back in the trench, Clarke moved among the surviving ships. Training exercises began immediately. The fleet's weapon systems were tested against simulated orbital strikes. Engineers repaired hulls under extreme pressure. Children of the ocean, the next generation born in the deep, were drilled in emergency protocols. Their small hands learning to operate emergency systems with uncanny speed, Clarke watched them. Remembering a lesson his father once taught him? Desperation breeds cleverness. He whispered it to himself now. Every child here is a soldier and a savior. Whether they know it or not, internal struggles still. The Admiral could not rest. Each decision weighed heavily. He walked the observation deck alone, the ocean glowing faintly beneath him. If the Concorde returns, if they come with full force, how many will survive? The thought pressed against him, cold and relentless. Faith had always been part of survival. Clarke closed his eyes, touching the cross of the hydrostatic chapel nearby. Not luck. Someone wants us to live, he murmured. It was quiet, almost private, but it steadied him. Asterisk sometimes, in the silence of the abyss. It felt as though the ocean itself answered a low, resonant hum. Vibrating through hulls and decks alike, the first test, the first true test, came not from the Concorde, but from the storm. A massive cyclone formed unexpectedly above the Pacific. Its winds and rain threatened coastal stations, tearing freighters from moorings and lashing the ocean with fury. Clark saw it as an opportunity. "Deploy the fleet in tandem with the evacuation," he ordered. "We move civilians under cover. Use the storm to hide our signatures." Reyes hesitated. "The freighters won't last long in that weather." Clark's gaze hardened. "They'll last if humans are clever enough to make them." Rourke's hands flew across the controls. Engines surged, thrusters realigned, submersibles launched. Underwater drones scanned for obstacles. The storm above became an ally. Humanity moved in unison with the ocean's chaos. By nightfall, thousands of civilians were relocated to hidden harbors and trench-side sanctuaries. Not a single life lost. Not a single probe from orbit detected. Clark allowed himself a rare smile. Not bad for a day's work. The moral of humanity in the following weeks: the fleet's actions became routine. Coastal cities were subtly fortified. Civilian vessels retrofitted with stealth and emergency shields. Sensors placed in deep trenches and islands formed a web of human intelligence. Engineers developed rudimentary orbital defenses. EMP satellites disguised as weather monitors. Laser arrays hidden inside scientific installations. Every innovation came from necessity, ingenuity, and the drive to survive. Humans had no miracles, only resolve. Clark observed it all from the bridge of the Seraphim. Each day he felt the weight of command heavier, yet somehow lighter. He saw the truth of humanity reflected in the faces of his crew, fear mixed with hope, despair tempered by courage. Mortality braced against the impossible. It was not perfection, it was perseverance. The calm before the storm one evening, Clark stood on the observation deck watching the last sunlight fade into ocean and sky. Reyes joined him. "Admiral, they will come," he nodded, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. "Yes, and when they do, they will find something they never expected." She glanced at him. "And if we fail?" Clark's lips curved faintly. "We won't. Even in failure, humans endure. Even in chains, we find cracks to break through. That's what they can never take away." Subtle presence, as the wind howled above and the fleet lay hidden below. Clark felt it again, an unspoken presence, subtle yet profound. It was neither light nor sound, but something older than humanity, older than the ocean, older than war itself, the quiet intelligence that had preserved them this long. A presence that guided the improbable survival of the deep, whispered courage in impossible moments, and inspired ingenuity in despair. He whispered again, softly, "Not luck. Someone wants us to live." And somewhere far above and deep below, the universe listened. The ocean had teeth, and humanity had learned to wield them. For weeks, the ghost fleet had moved beneath the waves and along hidden surface corridors, building, repairing, training. Coastal cities, secretly reinforced, now served as staging points for a conflict the world above did not yet see. Admiral Noah Clark watched the glowing energy grids. Along the fleet's hulls, the ocean was quiet, but the storm within him and his people had never been calmer. Every man and woman aboard, every engineer, every child trained in emergency drills knew the stakes. The Concorde would return, and when they did, there would be no mercy. The orbital threat far above. In the black silence of space, the Concorde fleet stirred. Vale Erix had done what he could. He had hidden humanity's secret long enough for them to prepare, but he could not stop the response. From the void beyond Mars, a flotilla of the Concorde's best warships formed, plasma shields gleaming, weapons primed. Sensors scanning the planet like predators circling a wounded prey. Their axe successor, a being of cold crystal named Cosvelen, had taken command. Unlike his predecessor, he had no tolerance for mercy. He saw humans as a contamination to be excised, a virus pretending its civility. Vale watched the flotilla from orbit, hands trembling over his console. "They have no idea what's coming," he whispered to himself. Or perhaps they do, and it terrifies them. The first move on Earth. Clark convened the fleet's council, the Seraphim, and 7 operational warships gathered in the shadow of the Mariana Rift. Submersible drones scouted orbital approaches. Oceanic sensors mapped gravitational disturbances and high-altitude energy anomalies. "This is no longer a defensive war," Clark said. His voice carried authority without arrogance. "The Concord believes we are cowed. We will show them we are not only unbroken, but dangerous." Reyes frowned. "We have limited weaponry in space. One misstep. We lose the fleet, the surface cities, and every life aboard." Clark's eyes didn't waver. "Then we make every move count. Precision over power. Ingenuity over volume. Humans survive by thinking when others strike with force." Rourke muttered, "Cleverness will save us." "Great. That worked in the trenches last time." Clark ignored the sarcasm. "Eve, prepare orbital launch sequences. Target satellites and orbital observation posts first. Ensure they cannot warn the fleet. Then we ascend." Confirmed. "Orbital stealth protocols engaged," Eve replied. Breaking the surface, the ascent was brutal. Massive thrusters ignited, boiling the ocean above, sending towering waves outward. The fleet's silhouettes emerged like leviathans into the storm-whipped night. Lightning cracked the clouds, painting steel with flickering gold. For a fleeting moment, humanity revealed itself to the sky. Then, with a coordinated push, the ghost fleet pierced the upper atmosphere. Pressure vents hissed, shields strained, as the air outside sizzled with the friction of breaking the oceanic envelope. Yet, for all its fury, the fleet remained intact. Clark gripped the bridge railing. Good. Now, the rising tide. HFY in action, humans, had always been unpredictable. The Concord learned that too late. The orbital satellites fired first. Plasma beams streaked down like artificial lightning, attempting to sever the ascending vessels. But the Ghost Fleet responded, not with blind aggression, but with improvisation, shields phased in rhythmic pulses, mirroring satellite scans and creating interference patterns that jammed targeting systems. Rourke shouted, "They're tracking us." Eve, adjust waveform. Waveform adjusted. Targeting interference successful. Reyes leaned in, her brow furrowed. They won't expect it. It's brilliant. Clark's lips pressed into a thin line. It's human. One by one, the satellites flared and fell. A few shattered, a few tumbled into uncontrolled orbits. And all of them took their surveillance of humanity with them. The rising tide was no longer oceanic, it was orbital. The first strike, the Concord fleet. Stunned by the human ascent, regrouped, Cosvaline's crystalline form glinted under distant starlight. Engage orbital suppression. Fire plasma arrays. Leave nothing alive. Vale Erix whispered into his console, fingers trembling. This is madness. They cannot hope to survive. But Clark's fleet had prepared. Primary batteries, he ordered. Fire on orbital energy nodes. Keep shields phased. Batteries activated, Eve responded. Massive ion cannons erupted from the Ghost Fleet, their beams piercing the void. Concord satellites and observation drones exploded in white fire. Plasma arrays attempted to retaliate, but the humans anticipated it, their shields dancing with uncanny precision. Each shot, each maneuver, showcased human ingenuity under pressure, what the Concord called reckless. Clark called survival the moral moment during the battle. Clark paused to watch a small human vessel, the Dawnlight, one of the converted freighters, execute a perfect evasive maneuver. Its crew were civilians, trained only through months of necessity and emergency drills. Yet here they were, dodging plasma streams, their lives hanging on clarity, courage, an instinct. Clark felt pride swell like a tide inside him. Humanity was fragile. Humans were flawed, but they were unstoppable in ways no algorithm could predict, no treaty could contain. Reyes noticed his gaze. Sir, look at them, he said softly. Every mistake we avoided, every life saved. It's proof that humans are cleverer than their oppressors think, and we're only beginning. A subtle divine presence amid the chaos. Clark felt it again, the quiet, pervasive presence that had guided them since the deep ocean. Not in the shields, not in the cannons, not in the fire they were human ingenuity, but in the timing, the survival, the improbable success against impossible odds. He felt a whisper. Someone, or something, wanted humanity to endure. He closed his eyes for a moment. Not luck, he murmured. Someone wanted us to live. The turning point, the Concorde fleet regrouped, firing coordinated plasma volleys. One of Clark's ships, the Vigilant, took a direct hit. Its hull fractured and reactor warning lights flashing. Clark made a rapid decision. Evasive maneuvers. Pull them into the storm cloud. Use the ion currents to mask our position. Calculating trajectory. Ready, Eve replied. The fleet twisted, diving back toward the Pacific, plasma trails slicing through the clouds. Concorde sensors tried to follow, but the storm distorted every reading. The humans disappeared into the tempest, leaving the Concorde fleet uncertain, blinded, and enraged. Vale Irix watched from orbit, awe and disbelief mixing. They're using the ocean and the storm as weapons. Clever. Damn clever. The aftermath of the first engagement by dawn, the Ghost fleet had returned to the hidden trenches, battered but undefeated. They surfaced briefly to assess the damage. Hulls scarred, shields strained, lives lost, but the fleet survived. Humanity had proven that even when the Concords might rain from the heavens, human ingenuity and courage could not be contained. Clark walked the observation deck, silent. Beside him, Reyes and Rourke watched the sun break over the waves. Will they come again? Rourke asked, voice low. Clark nodded, eyes on the horizon. They will. But we are ready now. They may have technology, numbers, and treaties, but we have resolve, creativity, and faith. And they will underestimate that. Reyes spoke softly. You think someone up there is still guiding us? Clark didn't answer immediately. He only whispered, if so, I am grateful. The ocean beneath them hummed faintly, as if affirming the thought. Above the Pacific, the stars had become a battlefield. The Ghost fleet, battered but unbroken, hovered at the edge of space. The atmosphere burned around their hulls as thrusters countered gravity. Below, Earth remained hidden beneath a storm-choked vela, fragile cradle of life humanity could no longer afford to leave unprotected. Admiral Noah Clark stood on the bridge of the Seraphim, scanning the void. Behind him, the remaining fleet gleamed like a constellation of steel and faith. Every vessel, every crew, was a testament to the stubbornness of humanity's survivors who had been forbidden weapons, now wielding them in defiance of every treaty. Eve, Clark said, voice taut. Orbital satellites? All Concorde observation satellites neutralized. Remaining orbital assets tracked. 5 confirmed warships inbound. Distance: Arshawan kilometers. Estimated arrival: 36 minutes. Clark's jaw tightened. They learned fast. They adapt. But so do we. Commander Reyes leaned forward, her eyes on the display. Sir, our trajectory options are limited. If we engage them in straight combat, they'll overwhelm us. Clark's lips curved faintly. Then we don't fight straight. We fight smart. Into the gauntlet, the fleet advanced slowly toward orbit. Entering a corridor between storm-clouded atmosphere and cold vacuum, sensors flickered as ionized particles from the upper storm layers interacted with thrusters. Clark smiled faintly. Good, he said. The storm works in our favor. Admiral Rourke muttered from engineering. These thrusters are running hot. One miscalculation, and we burn. Clark's eyes swept over the map. Then calculate precisely, Rourke. Every meter, every second counts. Evie's voice cut in. Orbital intercept courses detected. Incoming weapons arrays projected within 12 minutes. Recommendation: evasive and preemptive strike. Do it, Clark said. HFY ingenuity humans had never fought in space before. They had fought with fear, with desperation, with ingenuity. Clark relied on all three. The Ghost fleet split in formation, not in a straight line, but in undulating waves. Smaller vessels darted toward the storm-lit atmosphere, while larger ships ascended in tight arcs. Sensors jammed Concorde targeting systems with phased plasma emissions. The human strategy wasn't too overpowered. They used disruption, deception, and anticipation. Rourke's fingers danced across the controls. We're ghosting our thermal signature through atmospheric currents. The Concorde sees us, but not clearly. Reyes grinned. Clever. Infuriatingly clever. Clark nodded. We survive because we adapt. They destroy because they rely on rules. The first clash, the Concorde fleet emerged from orbital dark, weapons primed. Plasma arrays flared. Particle lances erupted like lightning against the rising ghost fleet. Clark remained calm. Evasive maneuvers alpha. Deploy mirror decoys. Mirrors deployed. Concorde targeting disrupted. The fleet's hull shimmered as holographic decoys projected false positions. One Concorde warship fired, striking nothing but empty space. Another swung into the first decoy, tearing its own formation apart. Vale Irix, observing from his hidden orbital station, whispered under his breath, "This is human." Chaos made visible. The strike into Space Clark's patience had a purpose. Target their shields, he ordered. Not their hulls. Disrupt energy flow. Make them bleed plasma. Targeting complete, Eve replied. The Seraphim's ion cannons fired. Streams of charged particles slicing into Concorde shield arrays. Shimmering protective fields flared, then collapsed. Plasma cascades spilled into space. Smaller human vessels followed suit, striking in precise bursts. Avoiding the brute force approach the Concorde favored, each strike was surgical, a lesson in human ingenuity. Reyes turned to Clark. They can't believe we're doing this with minimal losses. Gave her a grim smile. They'll learn soon enough. The weight of sacrifice, but victory came at a cost. The Dawnlight. A retrofitted freighter crewed by civilians trained for emergency operations, took a direct plasma hit while shielding a smaller vessel. Alarms screamed, lights flickered, and the hull twisted in impossible angles. Clark clenched the railing. Evasive maneuvers beta? Pull survivors. Scans indicate 72% hull integrity loss. Life support nominal. Crew injured but stable, Eve reported. Reyes looked at Clark. We're losing people, sir. Clark's jaw tightened. Every engagement will cost us lives. What matters is that we choose the fight, not be chosen. A murmur ran through the bridge. Quiet acknowledgement. Silent prayers. Humans surviving, learning, improvising. This was defiance. Incarnate, a glimpse of the divine as the fleet maneuvered. Clark felt it again, the subtle intelligence that had guided them from the depths. Through storms, through orbital ambush. Not a miracle. Not a machine, something beyond comprehension. Every improbable escape, every precise calculation, every survival instinct felt guided. He whispered, not luck. Someone wants us to live. A low resonance hummed through the halls, like the echo of an unseen hand steadying them. And for a moment, the universe seemed aligned with human ingenuity. The turning point, the Concorde warships advanced aggressively. Forming a blockade around Earth, they fired in patterns designed to herd the ghost fleet. To trap humanity in a death spiral. Clark made his decision. Full fleet synchronization. Phased ascent through the flank. Target energy conduits of the lead ships. Avoid hull contact unless necessary. Trajectory calculated. Fleet aligned. Ready to engage. Humans surged, weaving through the Concorde formation. Ion cannons and plasma lances struck the lead vessels, tearing through shields, forcing them into evasive maneuvers. The humans' audacity unbalanced the enemy. Vale Irix observed silently. They are audacious, reckless, brilliant, and alive. HFY Defiance. Each human move was fueled by something no Concorde algorithm could anticipate. Courage, improvisation, empathy. A human ship, damaged and limping, collided with a Concorde drone to shield a smaller vessel, sacrificing itself to save another. Another used a storm's ionized clouds to hide a sudden strike that disabled the enemy's targeting systems. Every action was imperfect, yet terrifyingly effective. Humans were never predictable. Humans were relentless. Reyes turned to Clark, voice tight. "They'll never see us coming." Clark's gaze hardened. "That's because we aren't coming, we're rising." Victory in chaos, the first wave of the Concord fleet faltered. Shields failed, communication loops jammed, coordinated attacks collapsed. The humans had transformed their weakness at small numbers. The damaged vessels into an advantage through adaptability, ingenuity, and sheer will. The Ghost Fleet, battered but alive, held the orbital corridor. They had proven that humans could fight in the void, in defiance of every treaty and every expectation. The aftermaths. Earth's hidden defenders returned to the storm-choked atmosphere. Clark reflected on what they had achieved. The Concord had underestimated humans. They had misread the resilience that comes from desperation. And they had forgotten that humans fight not for glory, but for survival, for family, for hope. Reyes placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sir, we've done the impossible." Clark nodded. "No, we've only begun. The sky is not the limit anymore." The fleet descended toward hidden trenches, shields flickering, reactors humming. Humanity had survived the orbital gauntlet, but the war was far from over, and somewhere, far above and deep below, the universe watched. Silent, vast, and patient. The first stars of dawn glimmered above the Pacific. Fragile against the dark wash of storm clouds still lingering, Admiral Noah Clark stood on the bridge of the Seraphim, surveying the horizon. His fleet, less than half of what had once emerged from the trenches, hovered like wounded leviathans in the calm after storm and fire. Every hull bore scars. Every crew had endured loss. Yet, as he looked over the faces of men and women who had survived impossible odds, Clark felt the quiet surge of hope, defiance, unshakable humanity. The Concord would come again. They always did. But now, humanity had risen not in secret, not in fear, but with the audacity to confront the heavens themselves. The Concord returns far above. Cosvalone's crystalline warships formed a ring around Earth. Each vessel was a monument of cold precision. Its weapons primed. Shields blazing, Vale Eric's watch from orbit, a silent witness. His hands hovered over controls, trembling, powerless to act beyond observation. The humans had survived orbital engagement, yet this new strike would test them beyond the depths, the storms, or even the rift. Cosvalone's voice rang through the void. "The humans will be extinguished. Their defiance is irrelevant. Prepare annihilation protocols." From the shadows of the fleet, Clark's voice cut across comes, calm, unwavering. "They do not understand," he whispered. "They underestimate what humans are capable of." The rising tide's final surged. The Ghost Fleet ascended from storm-choked waters, shields flickering under the strain of repeated launches. Rourke shouted from engineering, "Thrusters are at max output. One misalignment, and we then align." Clark barked. "We survive by moving faster than fear," Eve chimed. Orbital gauntlet recalculated. Recommended engagement sequence Delta Zeta for maximum effect. Clark's eyes scanned the holographic grid. He knew the stakes. A single miscalculation could destroy the fleet and every life aboard. Yet hesitation had always been a human luxury, and they had none left. "Form phalanx," Clark commanded. "Small vessels flank. Ion cannons on the Seraphim lead. Disrupt energy conduits first. Shields on full phase. No ship left unprotected." The HFY factor human ingenuity shone brightest in desperation. Freighters, retrofitted with emergency shields and plasma pulse emitters, darted between warships, drawing fire, disrupting Concord targeting. Engineers aboard smaller vessels hacked satellite loops mid-battle, creating phantom vessels, false energy readings. In confusion, humans fought not as soldiers dictated by doctrine, but as living instruments of improvisation, creativity, and sheer will. Each act of ingenuity was a defiance of logic expectation, and the Concorde's assumptions. Reyes leaned close to Clark. They can't anticipate this. We're everywhere and nowhere. Clark's eyes did not leave the display. That's because they only read history. Humans don't follow history, they write it. The crucible of fire. Concorde's plasma volleys struck the fleet in waves of blinding light. The Vigilant already damaged from prior engagement took a direct hit. Decks shook violently. The crew screamed. Clark's hands tightened on the railing. Emergency evasive. He shouted. Deploy mirror decoys Alpha. Divert the blast paths. Decoys deployed. Concorde targeting disrupted, Eve confirmed. The blast grazed their hulls, ripping water and debris in the upper atmosphere, yet the fleet survived. Humanity had become a storm, unpredictable and unrelenting. From the viewport, Clark saw one human vessel, barely more than a converted freighter. Absorb a strike meant for a heavier destroyer, shudder but remain intact. The crew inside prayed silently, whispered prayers to a god unseen, and endured. Clark whispered almost to himself, not luck. Someone wants us to live. Ack! The turning point Clark observed the Concorde formation. They were organized, precise, but rigid. Humans were unpredictable. That was the edge. Eve, he commanded, initiate coordinated orbital sweep. Use storm energy, magnetic anomalies, and debris from their own satellites to mask our trajectories. Focus fire on lead ship's energy conduits. Sweep initiated. Optimal trajectory and fire sequences calculated. The Ghost fleet surged like an ocean tidal wave in space, weaving unpredictably, masking movement through magnetic turbulence, plasma interference, and precise phalanx rotations. Concorde ships faltered. Shields overloaded. Communication arrays failed. Energy conduits flared and collapsed under human ingenuity. VAEEL, Erix, serving silently, muttered, they cannot be machines. They are chaos made deliberate. The final confrontation caused Velen, recognizing the faltering Concorde fleet. Activated full orbital annihilation protocols. Plasma lances, energy beams, particle arrays converged on Earth in a deadly ballet. Clark assessed the grid, too many incoming. Too precise for brute defense. Prepare the fleet for final engagement, he said. We cannot survive with conventional tactics. We fight with mind, faith, and courage. We fight like humans, understood, Eve responded. Shield synchronization at 98%. Weapon calibration for energy feedback. Clark raised his hand. Fire on my mark. The Seraphim's cannons unleashed ion streams at energy conduits, shattering Concorde shields and disabling primary weapons. Smaller vessels followed, flanking with precision strikes and using environmental hazard satellite debris. Magnetic storms, and even reflected plasma pulses to devastate Concorde formation, one by one. Enemy warships faltered, then fell, leaving the vastness of space littered with the remnants of their arrogance, the moral of humanity. The battle ended not with perfection, but with endurance. The Ghost fleet emerged victorious, though scarred and diminished. Humans had survived by ingenuity, courage, empathy, and sheer will. Clark gazed at the aftermath. We obey laws because we must. We survive because we adapt. And we rise because we refuse to be broken. Reyes looked at him, eyes wide. We did it. We actually did it, Clark nodded. Not because of luck, but because humans refuse to be caged. Every loss, every scar, every failure brought us here. And now, we are free. The subtle divine presence, as silence settled across the orbital battlefield, Clark felt it again. The subtle, pervasive presence that had guided humanity since the deep ocean. It was neither light nor sound, yet it had whispered courage, inspired ingenuity, and preserved life in impossible moments. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you. For the tide, for the storm, for the survival." And in that quiet, vast space between stars and ocean, it felt as though the universe itself acknowledged the defiance of its children, resolution, The remaining Concord ships retreated, scarred and humbled. Humanity had not only survived, they had written a new definition of defiance. Across Earth, hidden coastal stations emerged to rebuild, taking lessons learned in trenches, storms, and orbital voids. Children trained in survival drills, engineers refined ship designs, and humanity's ingenuity flourished. Clark surveyed his fleet one last time. We obey laws, yes, but we will never obey chains. We build, we survive. We fight, we rise. And somewhere, deep in the hidden trenches, ships resting in quiet waters reflected the last rays of sunlight. Humanity had endured. Humanity had risen. Humanity had won. The stars were no longer a limit. The oceans no longer a cage. The humans of Earth had proven what the universe would remember, not perfection, but perseverance. Not obedience, but courage. Not luck, but the relentless will to endure. And somewhere in the infinite, silent intelligence of creation, a quiet witness smiled upon them.